started as an intern in 1994. Yeah, I'm that old. And it was a fun summer. I spent too much time playing sports. I tore my ACL. Um, and the founder of Qualcomm was Irvin Jacobs. He would see me in the morning. He was such a sweet guy. Like, how are you doing? How's the internship going? And I'll be on crutches and just a great guy. So if you ever get a chance to meet Irvin, it's great. And then I came back after 2 or 3 years. I worked at another company for like 10 months and just wasn't going well. So I came back to Qualcomm and I've been here over 27 years. So it's been a while. And what else?
All right, so let's start with some questions. So, what has being Asian American meant for you, and what has it been like to walk in your shoes?
These questions are so hard. Hmm. Okay, so I have to start with Asian before I get to American.
Okay.
So I'm an immigrant, right? I was born and raised in the Philippines. Came here for graduate school. Came to Qualcomm, and you don't even think about Asian when you're in your home country, and then you go to another country, and then you stand out as Asian. And I think the things I think about are community, kind of air, food, and kind of a sense of thinking of the common good. Like there's just something about Asian communities where it's not a very individualistic culture. There's a lot of thinking about the group, um, and I guess I didn't realize that until I got exposed to other cultures, or like kind of more of the norm in other countries. So that was interesting, and what it means to Asian American, that took a while because um, I wasn't a citizen until much later, and I always thought I came to the U.S. to learn to graduate studies and then go home. So I always thought I'm here for just a few years or so. And so I never thought Asian American until I got married, and then my wife is an American. She's Asian, but she's American, and then and I didn't get a green card for a long time. I thought I'm going to just use my passport. And then 9/11 happened, and the Philippines was considered part of the axis of evil. So I couldn't get a visa to go anywhere to do work. So it's like, I got to get a passport. I got to get a, and that's kind of why I became a citizen, mostly because I couldn't get to do my work. I couldn't travel to the places I need to travel in time to get a visa. It would take 3 months to get a visa. So I think from then, I started to think about what it was to be able to vote. What was it to understand the electoral process? What is it like to camp? What is it like to have activism? And that's really interesting to think about. That it's no longer your host country. It's like you're part of this country, which for many years, it's just like, what's the norm in the United States? White, hetero, male, upper social class, usually Protestant. That's kind of the norm, right? So I probably don't match most of that except being male. And so to think of yourself as like American, a lot of it sounds like words, right? It's like you're American, but when your son goes to school and people look at you like, where are you from, right? And so it was this funny kind of thing where there's this cognitive dissonance, if you want to call it, where you're supposed to be American, but you're not treated like you're just one of the gang, right? And so I was on the East Coast for a long time. I was in Michigan for a while. And Michigan, once you leave the university, it's like people look at you like, my wife is South Asian, and we're ordering food at a Wendy's, and people look at us like literally staring, like you're different. It's strange, right? So to have that happen. And my son, who doesn't look like either of us, so people don't know what he is. Um, he, he used to play basketball. He loved basketball, and the kids playing basketball were mostly African heritage. His teams were mostly African heritage. And then he was in the magnet program where everyone was Asian, and both groups just didn't understand him. Right? The Asians would say, "You're not Asian. You play basketball," and blah, blah. And then the African heritage kids would bully him because he's like, "You're not a baller." Right? We go to these tournaments where literally we would be the only Asians, right? And it's just like they gave him crap, and he kind of had a chip on his shoulder. That's what kept him there. He kept, he said, "I'm going to prove him wrong." And but there are days when he was just crying and he just wanted to quit. And I had to tell him, when you don't love the game anymore, I'll let you quit. But if you still love this game, we're going to figure this out, and he stuck with it. He got 5 offers to play college basketball. It's like amazing what he figured out, but it was rough. It was rough.
And You mentioned also a comment he made when you guys actually finally moved out here.
Oh my God. So I moved out to the Bay Area 2014. Is that 9 years ago? And my family's like, why? Why are we moving out to the Bay Area? You know, it's like, just trust me. And so my son was walking around in the Sunset, if you're familiar with the Bay Area. The Sunset's a very Asian, like East Asian kind of area. And we're walking around after we'd moved there for 2 weeks. It was just him and me. I moved him out. It was just us two. And he's looking around. He goes, those Asians are really buff. And those Asians, wow, they got really good kicks. And those Asians are, and then he starts crying. You know, he says, what took you so long to get me out here? You know? And I didn't realize like how much he was stuck in this middle of like an Asian guy who was good at math and science, but loved to play basketball and just, you know, he couldn't quite figure out how to fit in. So it was cool.
To add to that, how has stereotypes and biases about the A and NHPI community played out in your upbringing?
Oh my gosh.
In your life
Yeah.
in general?
It's funny because again, when you grow up in another country, the cultural norms are just the cultural norms. Everyone's like that, right? And then you go to another country and then people just see you in one dimension of your cultural norms, right? So what is it, Asians? Work hard, really nice, good food, don't complain, right? Do what you need to do. And the thing is like when I came here, you know, my friends in grad school, they'd go out on Friday night, they would go drinking. I'd never do any of that. Like I was studying all the time, right? I was in the library. I mean, my wife is Asian too, so you know, most of the time we were just in the library. That was like our dating life for the first 4 or 5 years. And you know, at some level, it's great to be able to know how to work hard. Like I don't want to. That's a great trait, and I'm glad we do that. But there's a way in this culture is like that's what's expected, right? And that's the way the racism runs, right? Is that we all are we're here at Qualcomm. I'm sure a lot of us work 2 or 3 times as hard as the white person in our same position. I do that. I feel compelled to. I don't feel safe unless I'm working 3 times as hard. Um, but that's the way the racism is, right? You can't just be a regular person. And it's funny because if you're an immigrant and you have children, right? And you want to have a better life for your children, and your children start slacking off at school, they don't do their math, they get an 80%, which is an Asian F, and you're all like, why did I get an 80? And I tried to tell immigrant parents like, this was the point, right? You wanted to come here to have a better life for your children. They have a better life. They're not worried so much. They don't study as hard as you do. They don't have to go to Kuman every weekend. You know, it's all the stuff that we do, and but we get pissed off. We're like, you know, when I was your age, da 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 da, right? And it's like that was the point. When they're your age, you don't want them to have to do this. You want them to just kind of be quote regular people who can, you know, play basketball, enjoy music, you know, do art. So I don't know if I answered the
Folks,
question.
if we're as we're talking and you do want to interrupt and have additional questions, feel free to do so. Zishan, if any folks have questions online.
Oh,
Um,
Zishan has a hand up.
okay,
Zishan,
you can go ahead.
Yeah, that was an interesting point because as a parent, I also feel like, I mean, I don't do a lot of, extra uh, academic work outside of school. I think school should be enough for that. But I do feel that even at school, and again, it's just my personal experience, could be different for others. It feels as if the teachers also think that Asian kids in general, maybe not all of AAPI, but Asians, uh, they are getting enough support at home. So maybe I don't need to work so hard with this kid. So there is this feeling that some kids who probably are not being brought up in, quote unquote, the Asian way, they may, slip through the cracks because the teachers are not paying enough attention to them.
Yeah.
Just my experience.
Yeah, there's an experiment I like to talk about a lot. Is that I can't remember the actual experiment, but there's 100 students, high schoolers, and they got them to do this test, right? It was an hour-long test, and the test is really hard, right? So after 45 minutes, half of the students like, I give up, they turn it in, and at the end of the hour, the other 25 turn it in, right? So there's 25 students left, right? They're working at it, they're working at it, hour and a half, they're working at 2 hours, they keep working on it. So 2 hours they have to pull the test, right? Because the test was designed to be impossible. It was unsolvable. Guess who were the 25 students left behind? They were the Asian kids, right? And it's because there's this thing where we think that it's always just about hard work. Like you don't even question whether the problem is wrong. You just work, right? And it reminds me of the way sometimes we look at just work in general. Like if I'm unsure or I don't feel safe or something, the pull for me, like, everyone has an addiction, right? Some people smoke, some people drink. Some of us work too hard. That's how we feel safe. We work too hard, and it's hard on us, and we don't realize it's hard on our children, right? And we think that that's the way we're going to survive, and even when we're beyond the point of survival, we still act like we're in survival, right? And so I had said this last time. There are employees of Qualcomm who've committed suicide, right? In the hard times, they jump off the building in San Diego, W Tower. I know a parent of a coworker whose son came home and stabbed him and his wife to death, and then jumped off the building, right? Sorry, Asian heritage. And even when I started at Qualcomm when I was remote, um, I was working 14 hours a day because I was just so worried that I was not doing enough. It took me many years. And there are points where I was just like, this is too much. Like, how do you get out of this? And it feels like maybe suicide. Maybe this is the way. Like, I get it why people jump off buildings. I mean, there were times when I had a phone in my hand thinking, I need to dial 911 because I feel like I'm going to hurt myself because I'm stuck in this mold where I need to work hard to survive, but I can't do it anymore. And so we don't talk about this, right? We don't talk about this in Asian communities. I have family members who are very successful, just and they have like a daughter who wanted to be transgendered, and they had the money to pay for it. She went through all the counseling. She committed suicide. She drowned herself in the Potomac River. We never found her body, right? So there are things that I'm not saying gay oppression is only applicable to Asians, but think about it. You are in a group which already is outside of the norm, and our culture is to be very quote normal. We don't speak up. We don't stand out. We don't. And so that intersection is really hard, but we don't talk about it, right? And we think that we work hard, we get paid well, we're here at Qualcomm, which is great. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but there's things to figure out about our culture which get intertwined with the racism in the US and the economic system. I say, what are we the model minority for? We're the model minority for an economic system that wants us to work 3 times as hard and doesn't complain. Right? It's like those high school students who I'm going to work at this problem. It's unsolvable. I'm not going to question whether it's doable. And there's things to think about because there are bigger problems in the world that need to be solved by more than just hard work. Like, where do we put our minds? Anyway, sorry, I'm going.
Just to touch on the sense of belonging and being our whole selves and our identity here at the workplace, can you share some unique experiences about belonging and cultural representation here at Qualcomm and also outside?
That's a good question. There's there are events like this which are great. You get to see each other, and it's always good to see your people. Like, I don't come to this campus much, and I just saw Asian people everywhere. I was looking for a non-Asian person, and of course the people helping with tech were not Asian, right? So, and they're not white people either. So there's still this thing about racism that runs. But and then there's like food and so forth, which is good, But there's this place in our minds where how can you tell you really belong, right? And where do you still feel compelled that you need to keep quiet, that you need to not speak up, you need to work hard and just do your job? And that's the trickier one, right? Because it's almost like you can change everything around here, right? We can have more Asians, and you can have Asian food in the cafeteria and so forth. But if in your head you still think there's something that you can't say or you can't do because of your upbringing, then there's still an effect, right? And this is my craziest example, but so 2 years ago, I was at Qualcomm 25 years, and I've been trying to work on the climate crisis as much as I can. Some of you are part of the Climate Justice Club. And I thought, I just got to go full time on the climate crisis, right? And I need about 2 years to save enough so I can just not worry about salary and work. So I thought, okay, 2 years, I'm going to resign, like around now. And then I thought, but I can't just sit around waiting to resign. So I thought, I'm just going to tell people what I really think. And if they try to fire me, it'll take them 2 years because they'll give me this, PIP program, and then it'll be another year. So I thought, I just started telling people what I thought, and I thought for sure they're going to say you're crazy, right? And these ideas I had about the industry were just too complex to put in the memo and too complex to put in words in the PowerPoint. So I started making these drawings and shared it with people, and they really liked it. Like, wow, really? Okay, so I did this other thing with all these drawings, and they really liked it, and started doing these workshops on these ideas. And the funny thing was, so this is COVID, was lockdowns were winding down. So I go to San Diego and I go to this meeting with our senior VP and VPs and all these white dudes. And in the room, one of them stands up and says, well, this is we're going to hire 2 people to do Nick's job so he can do strategy. And I'm like, crazy. And then everyone in the room is nodding their head. I'm like, what is going on? It was like Twilight Zone, but someone forgot to play the, la 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 la. And I mean, first of all, it's funny that 2 people, right? So you know how many jobs Filipinos carry, right? At least 2 or 3, right? So, but the thought was like, you mean me sharing my thinking is not bad? Like it actually was a good thing. Like even now I'm telling you all these things I think, which I feel like someone's going to fire me for saying what I'm saying. But it turns out that I think the things that we hide back there we don't want to talk about are probably really important. And sometimes the status quo isn't actually the best solution, right? That sometimes you have to really think. I do a lot of these workshops for thinking out of the box. And people always like to say out of the box. What is thinking out of the box? It's thinking outside of your comfort zone. And we have a certain comfort zone because of the way we've been raised, right? My dad used to beat me a lot. If I told him what I think, he almost killed me once for telling what I thought. So there's a part of my mind is just like, for the longest time I was doing my PhD, I could not get my PhD done because I've always answered people on what I need to tell you so that you're not upset. I don't want to tell you what I think. I need to tell you so that I'm going to read you. And as I talk, if you're unhappy, I will change what I'm saying. And so when you get to a PhD and you have to do your independent research, it's very difficult, right? So I couldn't finish my dissertation. And I realized that's the training. Like I am so geared to tell you what I think you want to hear so that you're okay and, we get along, right? And so getting to this point where like, what do I really think? It took a while. And that's kind of the out of the box is you have to move out of that zone of comfort because we've been so scared and trained that we shouldn't say things out of that comfort zone.
Can you comment on a recent I guess I don't know how to call it. You just find like, oh wow, something that I did is actually making me feel seen.
You should prompted me this question. Okay, so this is the thing, right? When I was young, and I love to do this so a lot of people come to me and say, how can I get promoted? I say, I have no idea how to get promoted, but what do you want to do, right? And I tell people because if you start doing the things you want to do, you'll be happy, right? And usually if you do things you want to do, you do well and people promote you. If you do things that you don't want to do to get promoted, the worst thing is that you get promoted and you have to do more of the things you don't want to do, right? So the good thing about doing something what you want to do is that you could get promoted. And if you don't get promoted, you're still happy, right? So I ask people like, what did you like to do as a young person? Like, what do you remember? Was it playing in the sand? And I used to like to make up songs, to myself, of course. And so, God, when was this? I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, I wanted to start writing songs and, I had to learn. And I was trying to find things to write songs about and couldn't find a good topic. And then I realized in 1986, I was protesting in the streets of the Philippines for the People Power Revolution. So I was 16 years old and I was trying to overthrow Marcos. And he was a dictator for 20 years. And I forgot, I'll write about that, right? And these words just came out in an hour, and then the song was done in a day, right? Of course, I had to work on it, and I never showed it to anyone, right? For the longest time, too embarrassed, I would just show it to my 5-year-old son, and then I showed my wife, and then little by little, I shared it with other people, and I took pictures from the photographs they took at the time, and put it into this video, and it's been around for 20 years. People have watched it. But recently, someone at Qualcomm, Leilani De Leon, she got a hold of it. And she's like, you need to submit this to a film festival. I'm like, you're kidding me. And that's like, you don't know what you're talking about. But she knows, like she goes to this film festival, she's giving me advice. So now I'm working on this film based on this song I wrote 20 years ago, and the point was like, if you're Asian and you want to write music and stuff when you're young, what your parents say, yeah, hobby, great, get your math done. But it's so much fun, right? And I guess what am I trying to say is that there's so much more to us than we've been trained to do and what this society expects of us. And there's so many fun things to do if you can figure out what you really want to do. And I'm not saying you don't want to do this. I still love doing engineering, but there are many other things I want to do as well. Pickleball is my new passion. Like I play pickleball. I tell people I'm not addicted. I just play 1 to 3 hours a day. That's all. So,
Um, with the struggles or the things that we faced during COVID with, Asian hate and stuff and the Asian Stop Asian Hate movement, what future challenges do you see in the AAPI and NHPI communities?
so I've done a lot of work with professors and nonprofits about identity. And I don't know if you'll fully get this, but there's this really good thinking about identity, and it's basically claim it, clean it up, and almost throw it away. And what does this mean, right? So, if you're in a culture like here where we're not the dominant culture, there's a lot of racism that says there's something wrong with not being, white heterosexual male, blah blah blah, right? And so the first part of claiming it is just really appreciating our culture as Asians, like the food, the way we think, even the way we're a little too uptight with our studies, right? All of that, because that came from generations of surviving different hardships, right? We pick up these behavioral patterns because something hard happened back there for our people, and we had to learn to do this. And it's good that we know how to do it. And at some point, when you can claim this, the next thing to do is what they call clean it up. And you start to think about, okay, I do know how to work hard, but do I need to be working hard all the time? Do I need to use that as my solution to everything? Or is there something else I need to figure out? Like my child is having difficulty at school. Is the thing to push them into Kumon, or is to figure out what's going on, right? So there's something about cleaning it up where you appreciate your culture, you know where it started, where it came from, and then you start to realize, okay, some of these behaviors I don't want anymore. And there's flexibility to think, when does it make sense, when does it not, right? And the last piece is what we call throwing it away. And it's not to be taken lightly. I don't want people to say, oh, I'm colorblind, there's no racism and so forth. There is racism. But in the end, we all are part of the human race. But to get to that point, each of us has an identity that was assigned to us, not our own choosing. And society is, how do you say this, added a lot of baggage to us based on how we look, right? I always tell people, the excuse for racism is your skin color or how you look. The reason is the economic, right? Racism keeps us divided so that we can say, oh, the Asians, they're taking all the jobs, the Mexicans are doing this, the immigrants, right? And it keeps people distracted from understanding that there's an economic system that's designed to really extract value from every worker and hyper concentrate it into the hands of a few, right? How many billionaires do you have now versus 20 years ago? But if you don't understand this, and you get caught into this, politics, that nothing gets figured out. Right? I mean, it's such a divisive issue used to prevent people from solving the real problems in the world, right? And I think this is where my mind goes, because for a long time I've been working on ending racism and sexism, and of course the climate crisis, right, this is looming. So the way I think about it is, we don't need to be producing more things to solve the climate crisis. That's partly what got us into the problem, is that we're over-consuming, we're overusing resources, overusing CO2. We need to be a bit smarter about where we put our time and resource, and where we kind of buy into the, hey, if I just do my job and get it done and work hard, things are good. We can get co-opted or used in things where we don't really want to be doing this, right? We don't want to be affecting the environment in a negative way. So, gosh, I've said a lot, but it's just something about, I like that our division lately has been doing a lot more strategy thinking. Is like, it's easy for us to I'll work on this next paper because I submit it and I have something tangible and I feel like I've done something well. But strategy means you have to step back and think, how does this play into the big picture? What's the value? Like, the last thing I want to do is work on something really hard, which has no value, right? Even if I get a patent bonus, like, if it's not going to be used, what's the point, right? So at some level, it's like thinking bigger about how you see the world. What are the issues? How do you want to have an impact? And then where do you put your mind, right? And where do you want to put your efforts? So I think that's an area to look at. And I think one piece about this that is important for us with other. So I don't say people of color, because it's a funny term, because it's relative to white people. I like to say people of the global majority, because if you think about non-white people, God, I think we're almost like 7.5 billion of the planet, of the 8. Like, Asians are, China and India are what, 1.4 billion each. Africa is another 1.4 billion, right? So people of the global majority. And I guess that was the other thing I wanted to say, is that if we are like 60% of the world's population is Asians, right? If we could figure out what to do about the big problems in the world, like the climate crisis and so forth, that's a lot of people, right? And I mean, one thing is we can't have the rest of the world follow the U.S. Standard of living, right? The U.S. standard of living, CO2 per capita emissions is twice that of China and 4 times that of India. Like so, India, which is mostly vegetarian, is helping a lot in terms of not using animal agricultural. So there's so much stuff we've figured out where don't just follow the status quo, because the status quo in modern capitalism is to go with this kind of very focused U.S. market. This is the American dream, and we export it to the other parts of the world to sell and make a profit. You do that, we will destroy the earth, faster than we have in the past, right? So, how do we think about that as Asian Americans? How do we think that about our own cultures and what our countries can do? Was that too much? Okay, cool.
So we're at the point where we talked about you're gonna run a quick exercise amongst the audience.
Yeah. So I guess we'll say goodbye to the people.
Well,
are there questions?
Are there any well, we were gonna do Slido here.
Okay.
Can we
Yeah, I guess
the team?
It's hard because they have to do breakout rooms. So they'll have Zishan had a question.
Oh, Zishan, go ahead.
Go ahead, Zishan.
I can wait. I mean, is this the right time? I can hold on.
Go ahead, and then
okay.
We'll ask questions now, and then we'll do the exercise.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you, Nick. I mean, this has probably been the best talk that I've been to. It's totally unfiltered. It's totally from the heart. I'm loving it. So going back to what you were just saying about exporting the American dream, right? How about like Asian Americans or like minorities, immigrant minorities in the US? Do we also buy into the whole capitalist system? Do we also buy into the whole concept of manifest destiny? Exceptionalism of American exceptionalism, or I mean, obviously, as we if there's upward mobility, you sort of have to do that. You have to be, in order to pass off as American, you have to believe in America and for the most part, I mean, you can be on the left, they'll call you radicals, but mostly in the mainstream, you have to sort of buy into that whole idea of Americana. Secondly, I wanted to ask you about, and I asked this question to Councilman Lee, but I didn't get the answer I was looking for, but there was an answer. That is in terms of allyship with other minority groups. So we had this scandal, for example, in Los Angeles last year, or I don't know, year before last, with the city council. There was this whole thing between the Latinos and the Blacks, and they were trying to wrest control from each other. Where are Asian Americans putting themselves in the whole equation? Because I know when Asian hate came around after COVID, I did see, at least in our community, we were allying more with the conservative right. And there was this shift in tone. There was a sort of realization that, okay, we have to align ourselves with the centers of power. How do you see that going? Do you think we are going to be served better by being Americans as defined in popular culture these days, or do we need to follow our own path?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll start with the second question first and see if I can gather my thoughts. So the first thing I like to say to people is, again, racism is based in economics. Okay, so you think about China, right, is the next biggest economic superpower. It does not buy into the U.S. world order, right? So this is a threat to our economic system, so it becomes a military threat and so forth. And so when you see, like, we talk about a country like China as a threat, and then you have people who look like me, you, and of course there's going to be Asian hate, right? And you just have someone like, some leader to spur it up. It's there, but it's there, right? And then the other thing I was going to say, losing my line of thought. Oh, I guess, okay, there's that piece about Asian hate. And then there's the part connecting with our, fellow Black, Latino brothers and all the other people of the global majority. So this thing about the model minority racism towards Asians, it's a beautiful wedge issue, right? Because it can say to the Black person or the Latin person, there's no racism. You just have to work as hard as the Asians, right? But we are within the racism when we're working 3 times as hard as someone else, right? That's not that's not a fair life, right? Where we have to work that hard to be okay in this society. That we were, I think they did this last week. They said that they didn't let Asians for a long time until they realized we could work on the railroads, and then we had skilled labor, right? We're all mostly immigrants of skilled labor. So we're here because we work hard, right? But that's used as an issue to tell all the other groups, like, hey, you know what? Just work as hard as them. And so then we get set up into this role where when things go wrong, there will be also Asian hate from that community, right? Because we're put as this poster child, there's no problem. And then we sometimes feel superior. We think, oh, we're better because we work harder. No, we're better because we're playing this line. This is the role we play, right? So I think there's need to understand the way that works, so we're not confused about why we have probably a little bit more wealth than other groups because of the way we've been set up. And of course, we have certain cultural norms that tie very well into this. As I said, keep quiet, work hard, beautiful, right? It's just a good match. So, the first question was harder. What was the first question? Something about. What did you ask, Ishan?
Zidane, do you want to chime back in?
What was the first question? Oh yeah, immigrants. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. So that's a tough one, right? Because first of all, I don't want to blame anyone for the roles we played. Right? It's a system, right? And so I've been trying to figure this out for 25 years, and I'm still working here, and I'm trying to make my change. But so when you're an immigrant, it's like it's sink or swim, right? It's like you got to work your butt off, and some of us we got nice educations, so we got paid more. There are many Asians. You have to remember, we don't all look like us, right? There are many Asians out there. If you go to certain parts of the country, they're the ones cleaning the toilet. They're the ones, I'm Filipino. There are many areas where we are just the domestic help. Sorry, I shouldn't say just. We are the domestic help. We're the caregivers for the elder. And so you do need to work hard to get ahead here in this culture. They don't just hand it to you. There is a bit more opportunity and upward mobility than most other cultures. I'll say that it's not great, but there is some. And I think the challenge is there's this term I use with my sons, right? I call it the appearance of conformity. So if you can't change society yet, you kind of have to work with it, right? So there are people who just kind of go out and say, I can't do this, and they rebel. And they either get outcast or they get squashed by society. And so you can't do that until society changes. But you can play the part that you need to play, but in your mind, you don't agree. So it's the appearance of conformity. So whether it means you've got to work, these hours for now, because this is what you need to make ends meet. But in your mind, this is not who you are. This is not the role I want to play. And at some point, you'll change it, right? And it's good for young people to know that, because for young people, there's so much set up for young people where they just have to take it, right? And what I try to tell my children is like, I can't change it for you right now. I'm sorry. And I know it's wrong. But can you just play the part with the understanding that I know that it's wrong, and we'll figure this out when you get older. This is how I got my son through basketball when teams were bullying him and just had a hard time. I said, I know it's wrong, and I'm sorry. We're going to figure this out. And for now, we were just going to have to figure out how to play with this. And it was good. I think it was good for him to hear that.
Any other questions online or from here, guys? I think we'll wrap it up.
And then we'll do the exercise.
Yeah,
Okay.
for the folks online, thank you so much for joining us today. Please visit Go QAPEN for any upcoming events and other news from our new Qualcomm Asia Pacific Employee Network.
And if you want to figure out what you want to do about the climate justice or about being Asian, contact me. I love hearing what people are thinking and want to talk about. Love to listen to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.